play in the NFL, but I mean, that can't always happen. So I want to get to college and then get my education and then see what happens after that.
Fame can be really scary to people who aren't ready for it, but for Trevor on the other hand, he has already had a glimpse into the spotlight way before being the latest #1 draft pick. Before the hashtag Tank for Trevor became a thing for NFL teams, Trevor was a hometown hero in little Cartersville, Georgia, where he put on a show for thousands of fans that packed the stadium under the lights on Friday nights. The kid who was a movie star before he knew he was a movie star was signing autographs and taking pictures everywhere he went around his local town. But being locally famous didn't change his character at all. He always kept his humble, cool, calm, and collective personality traits with him in every room he walked into. So, how did Trevor Lawrence become the most hyped up quarterback in the last 10 years? And is now on the path to being the next best thing in the NFL? Let's talk about it.
Hey, what do you think about being the #1 player in the country, by the way?
It's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting.
William Trevor Lawrence was born in Knoxville, Tennessee on October 6, 1999. He is the middle child after his older brother Chase, who was an artist, and his younger sister Olivia. When Trevor first strapped up his pads around age 6, he was a lineman at 55 pounds. By his preteen years, he moved to the defensive side, lining up as a defensive end, linebacker, and safety. But once the family moved to Cartersville, Georgia, right before his middle school years, he eventually became the shot caller and settled under the center and began wearing his lucky number 16. Robert Allen, the Cartersville middle school coach, remembers seeing Trev for the first time and the two almost being the same height, and Robert was about 6'2". Just in the 6th grade, he was launching the ball down the field. And what blew the mind of the other coaches and parents watching was how his passes were tight spirals and on the money. By the time he reached 8th grade, he started to become the local star and was going to do well at the high school level. According to ESPN, his family was investing into his football career from a very early age. His parents had paid a high-level quarterback trainer to work with Trev in his offseason, so he was well developed beyond his peers. His middle school coach was so impressed by his skills, and after he led the team to a perfect 2013 season, he put together a highlight tape of Trevor highlights and sent it to Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama while he was still in the 8th grade. In January 2014, he was part of the Georgia's All-Star team, loaded with future D1 players that won the FBU Football University National Championship in San Antonio, Texas, which showcased top high school talent while little Trevor was still in the 8th grade. 2 months later, he was invited to an MVP camp at Gwinnett Central High School for 9th and 11th graders, but they allowed Trevor to participate because he was a quarterback and wasn't going to have to deal with contact. And while at the camp, the other high school kids were impressed with what they were seeing. He stood tall and lanky at about 6'2", 170 pounds, and just had a hell of a day. Everything he threw was on the money. At the camp, they gave out a top underclassman award that had never been won by a 9th grader, and Trevor ended up taking the award home as the only 8th grader to attend the camp. By that time, Joey King, Cartersville's new varsity head coach at the time, was well aware of the 8th grader. Taking the job as the new varsity head coach, he learned there were 2 quarterbacks he needed to meet, each of them talented in their own way. One was a rising junior and the team's current starter, Miller Forstall. The other was a 6'2" 8th grader who was dominating at the middle school level and was rising to a local star. And that summer, Trevor was one of 3 8th graders that Joey invited to Cartersville High freshman and JV team's spring practice in 2014. But it didn't take long to see that he wasn't going to be playing freshman or JV. He was definitely going to be competing for that starting position on varsity.
I'm hoping to start as a freshman or sophomore when I get there, so.
And sure enough, by week 4 of the 2014 season, just 2 weeks after a 27-26 loss to North Cobb, the decision was made to move the junior starting quarterback Miller Forstall, then considered a decent college prospect with good athleticism, to tight end. Trevor had been taking snaps in the previous 3 games, but now he was going to become the permanent starter. By the end of that season, Trevor had thrown just over 3,000 yards and 26 touchdowns. The Purple Hurricanes made it to the semifinals that year before getting put out by Beaufort 27-3, but there was a strong sense Cartersville was going to be a dominant team in the coming years. His 9th grade year was also the year he started his trademark look by growing out his hair. Trevor and some teammates decided they no longer wanted short hair, resulting in the four making a bet that whoever cut their hair first will have to go back to the buzz cut that they all previously had. But a few coaches on the team thought that their hair bet was going to become a distraction, as a few Cartersville players, including the star quarterback, started to look like band members. But the hair never became a distraction because Cartersville went undefeated in Trevor's sophomore year, this time defeating Buford in a 10-0 victory in the state finals. There was no stopping Trevor Mania. And what once started as a simple friendly bet is still going strong for Trevor. Every Purple Hurricanes home game became a must-see event, and not for just Cartersville's local fans, but for out-of-towners as well. When Trevor started making headlines and his highlight tapes hit the internet, everyone wanted to see his ability to play in person. Darrell Givens, the owner of the Capri restaurant, one of Trevor's favorite spots, a breakfast and lunch place across the street from the home stadium Trevor played at, usually closes at 2 p.m., but Darrell opted to skip the games and instead keep his restaurant open into the evening. His business in the town of about 20,000 people increased by 40% on Friday nights. A father and son stopped in to grab something to eat before a game and said that they drove all the way from Tennessee just to see Trevor play. From that moment on at Cartersville, Trevor had to learn how to deal with fame. Once, two men drove all the way from Ohio and approached him as he was getting to his truck after practice one day. All they wanted was a photo and an autograph from the star high school quarterback. Also, once after a home game, he stayed out about 45 minutes after the game ended, just taking pictures and signing autographs while his other teammates were long gone. From that undefeated sophomore year, Trevor started a 41-game winning streak from his sophomore year to his senior year by an average margin of 36.5 points, preventing Trevor from putting up just outrageous passing numbers because the backup quarterback would always be placed into the game well before the fourth quarter. They were blowing out teams left and right, week in and week out. Just imagine having a tough long week at school with homework and tests just to go out and play against the #1 quarterback in your state on Friday night. Just sadness. But after 2 championship seasons, sophomore and junior year, he met his match as a senior as they were put out of the playoffs once again. His final high school game was a defensive battle with Blessed Trinity in a second-round playoff game where he was sacked 4 times, and the stunning upset snapped Cartersville's 41-game winning streak. But just as he went into high school as the next best thing, he left with the numbers to prove so. He broke all kinds of records at Cartersville over his 4 years. He broke Deshaun Watson's state record for passing yards and touchdowns. He closed his high school chapter throwing for 13,902 yards and 161 touchdowns, while leading Cartersville to consecutive state championships in 2015 and 2016. His only 2 losses were in 2014 and 2017, which both came in the playoffs. He finished his senior year with 41 touchdown passes and just 1 interception. From those efforts alone, he was named the top prospect in high school football according to multiple ranking platforms, with a perfect rating score across the board. He graduated about 4 months early from high school and became the new kid on campus in January 2018 at Clemson. Over the course of the next few months, with spring ball, there was talk about who was going to be the starting QB. Kelly Bryant, who led Clemson to a 12-2 season, a AFC title, and a college football playoff bid in 2017, or the long-hair freshman. The viewers' vote was towards Trevor after ESPN televised Clemson's spring game and delivered the hype across the country. And just how he went in and took things over back in high school, he did the exact same thing at Clemson. Even in the exact same time frame, Kelly Bryant lasted only 4 games as the starter before Trevor took over in 2018, which caused Kelly to leave the team days later in redshirt with the goal of finishing his career at another school. But there was no bad blood between the two. Kelly even admitted that Trevor was a bad boy in the backfield. From others though, the whole situation was troubling. The sports analysts who were praising Trevor back in the spring about how the freshman was the best way to go were now screaming about how unfair it was to Bryant. Anywho, Clemson would go on to win the national championship by whooping the college football king Alabama 44-16, closing his freshman chapter with 3,200 passing yards and 30 touchdowns on the season, and the National Freshman of the Year award. But sure enough, early 2019 season, after a slow but still winning start, the critics were at it again. Trevor wasn't as sharp as he was as a freshman. He was just simply not the same player. He threw 5 interceptions in the first 3 weeks, and the sports critics were attacking him as a one-year wonder.
Let's get to my top 5. Top 5 on the list. Number 5, Joe Burrow. Put it right up there. Let's go to number 4 on the list. Put a Jonathan Taylor, Wisconsin. Why? Go to number 3 on the list. Justin Fields, Ohio State. Why? Have you seen Ohio State Buckeyes? Have you seen the way that they perform? Number 2 on the list. Tua, put him up there. We know who this brother is. Y'all know who this brother is. We got to go to number 1 on the list. Give it to me. Jalen Hurts, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, big-time players on Clemson. We'll talk about that. But Trevor Lawrence has struggled a little bit in the first 5 games. That's right.
But in the end, it was Clemson, and we're going Trevor Lawrence. So
by week 4, things started to click again, and Trevor led Clemson to another undefeated season, with 3,100 passing yards and 34 touchdowns on the season, and they found themselves back at the national championship. But this go-around, Trevor struggled against the loaded LSU defense, going for only 18 of 37 and 234 yards with no touchdowns. And with the weapons LSU had on offense, they just put the game out of reach. Joe and the Tigers handed Clemson a fat L, 42-25. But not letting that championship loss affect him too badly, he bounced back in 2020 and picked up where he left off, as always dominating his opponents. Over the course of the first 6 weeks, he threw for 1,800 yards and 17 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. But in late October, he missed 2 weeks due to testing positive for
Trevor Lawrence, testing positive for the
but was able to manage a healthy recovery and finish the regular season with 3,100 passing yards and 24 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions on the season. Became the second Heisman finalist in school history, joining 2015 and 2016 finalist Deshaun Watson and finishing second. Back facing against Ohio State for the second time in back-to-back years in the semifinals and up against his hometown native, Justin Fields, Ohio came out on top this time around, 49-28, leaving Trevor just short of 3 straight years to the national championship.
With the first pick
in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select
Trevor Lawrence, quarterback Clemson.
Trevor Lawrence.
Which leads him to where he's at now, Jacksonville, Florida. With legendary coach Urban Meyer as the new head coach, Tim Tebow coming out of retirement at a new position, the hype is there. But there's still one question. Will that be enough for the Jaguars to go to the Super Bowl? And will he show out in his first year in the NFL as he did as a freshman in high school and in college? Only time will tell.
Obviously, dream of winning the Super Bowl. It's going to be probably my biggest goal my whole career, and then hopefully can do that a few times. So. And you just don't know how things are going to work out. So obviously going to a new city, you got to figure all that out. But just excited to give all I have to a new city and start my family wherever that's at. So just really pumped.